I believe so.
Let's do this. Jasmine, shall we start the recording?
We're already recording. You're set to go.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to SREB's webinar series, Bouncing Back from COVID, Using Education and Workforce Development Dollars. My name is Kim Anderson. I'm a senior policy researcher at SREB, and I'll be kind of moving us through the session today. We have a great group of folks joining. I'd like to invite everyone, if you wish, to say hello in the chat box by introducing yourself by name, by the state that you're dialing in from, and if you'd like, your organization or institution that you represent. You should see there a text as well from our colleague Jasmine Jones that indicates should you wish to contact her with questions or technical assistance needs, how to do that. To kick us off, I'd like to turn it over to SREB's president, Dr. Stephen Pruitt.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of this work today. I look forward to actually a really great series. Kim and Dale and the team have really done some great things to get us really started in this conversation about bouncing back. So the whole motivation behind this series is that, I mean, nobody has to question this, and hopefully nobody's surprised by this, that we have a little bit of a work to do to come back from COVID-19. So the road to economic recovery from COVID-19 shutdowns will be long, and existing inequalities are continuing to widen. So we wanted to bring to bear some work that we've been doing at SREB, but also bring some experts in the field. I'm really excited about the group that Kim has brought together. I think that our speaker today is going to be fantastic. You've got so much to learn from all of them. So we're really excited about you being here and about this work. Kim, you can go to the next slide. So our guiding question is, how can states use workforce and education dollars to turn things around? This is going to be our focus, and obviously this is a lot about funding and how we can kind of start to right the ship. But before I turn this back over to Kim, let me just share something with you. This is preliminary work. We are not ready to publish this yet, but I'm giving all of you, since you were kind enough to join us today, I'm going to give you a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of a secret here. So some of you are familiar with our Unprepared and Unaware series that we started about a year and a half ago, where we basically looked at the fact that by 2030, the South could see as many as 18 million unemployable adults. And again, I want to say that and make sure you heard me, because unfortunately I'm actually outside. So if you hear cars or cicadas, it's because my wife is actually teaching AP physics inside, and I get distracted because I'm a science guy and I love talking about position time graphs. So I went outside. But let me just share with you that this 18 million unemployable adults, that doesn't mean that they're going to be unemployed. It means that they will be unemployable. In fact, our preliminary review of the economic data is actually showing that a lot of people who lost their jobs during COVID, they're simply not going to get the jobs back because they aren't, they don't have the skills to be able to move forward in an environment that actually has artificial intelligence and automation at its center. We've entered the fourth industrial revolution. And what that means is no longer will computers and robots work for us. They actually work with us and learn with us. And so our preliminary review of this data is showing that actually 2030 may no longer be the horizon. It actually is 2025. So if we don't get our heads around how to leverage this funding to really launch into a new era of education, to be able to provide a quality education for each student that's in the K-12, and upskill the adults who currently have only high school diplomas or less. We actually are going to see by 2025, we could very well be seeing an equivalent type of workforce shutdown. So I'm proud of our team, proud of our staff for the work they've put into this. I believe they have a lot to share, and I believe that you're going to learn a lot from them. So thank you for being here today. Kim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Stephen. Let's take a look at the series before we dive into today. So here at SREB, we're watching the changes with COVID, the changes in the workforce. We're watching the issues that you and the states are dealing with and the struggles of the people that you serve. We've designed this series to help you address that and use the funding at your that you have to bounce back. So we have 6 approaches to the problem. We're going to look at the first one today. Today revolves around gauging needs more frequently together. As we proceed through the series, each session is going to stand on its own. You can come to one or as many as you like. We hope you stick with us for all 6 because together they provide kind of a comprehensive approach attacking the problem from various angles. So next week, these are every Thursday for the next 6 Thursdays at the same time. Next week on September 3rd is addressing the issues and challenges of getting low-skilled adults that Stephen has just mentioned to earn credentials for those jobs most critical to bouncing back from COVID. On September 10th, we take the tack of looking at it from the angle of helping our students, our upper-level secondary students and brand new high school grads, keep that educational momentum going and earn those critical credentials for the jobs to bounce the economy back. On September 17th, we come at the angle from our business and industry colleagues. How can we help them prepare and hire new workers and upskill their incumbent workers to meet the challenges as industries change in response to COVID? On September 24th, we take the angle of our educators and training providers. How can they make their programs and services more tech savvy and flexible for changes that are happening at lightning speed under COVID? And then as Stephen mentioned, over the next handful of years as we reach that horizon towards 2025. And finally, we wrap up the series on August 1st with a really in-depth look at how to make sure that, in essence, the actions we take now in this emergency state under somewhat of duress because of COVID, that they align to and support the longer-term vision that we have in our states for economic growth. So join us for one or all. You can access the completed webinar recordings and our materials here at this website. So in this hour today, what are we going to look at? Gauging needs more frequently and prioritizing action together. We have a short time. We're well into the hour at this point. What we want to do is take just a few minutes to introduce some key ideas, some key strategies and considerations that we hope connect us. Now we'll know who we want to contact for what kinds of questions we have on the SREB staff and our presenters and each other in the participants. We want to share key strategies and policy considerations as well as actions to promote equity. We'll also have a look at a resource matrix so that as all of us from different perspectives come together around the table to address these issues, and in today's session, look at data and make decisions, we know what funding we can bring to bear to do that. And finally, we'll hear from a leading state, one of the best in terms of who's doing what's needed now to address dynamics under COVID. We'll hear from Chris Lowery at Ivy Tech Community College in the state of Indiana. So we're gonna have some presentations from us at SREB and our expert. Then we'll have some time at the end for discussion. We'll use some polls, and please take advantage of the chat box as we go. So let's take just, I'm hoping to do this in 2 minutes, a look at the context to set kind of a shared understanding of what we at SREB are going to be addressing in our recommendations. So what's the context? And why are the usual cycles of data analysis, the way we usually do it, not going to cut it under COVID? So we know that, especially with our federal funding streams like ESSA, Perkins, and WIOA, we tend to write these plans on 4 or more year cycles and maybe update them every 2 years with our local providers looking at data maybe annually to update plans, right? But industries now are changing at the speed of light. And to illustrate this, we pulled some data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We've got here on the right some national employment change data. So by industry down the left, you can see represented in the bars that go to the right, starting at 0 there at the bottom, you can see in hundreds of thousands, the number of people employed, getting jobs, right, in these various industries. This is in the month that just ended in July. So you can see that's pretty drastic. But if we were to take a look back just by a month and look at the data as it appeared between January and July, and this really represents changes between the shutdown that started in March and June, we can see these same numbers starting at this 0 mark, they go left now. Rapid changes in contraction of these various industries, right? So you see the great contrast in a very short amount of time. And if we were to break these numbers down more by group of people affected with an equity lens, these changes would be even more drastic in this short period of time. And we know that these changes are going to continue to keep happening. So that's kind of the pace. What's the scale? The scale of these fluctuations that we see is extraordinary, unprecedented, pick your word, right? Unseen. So how can we really see this visually? What you see here is a graph, again, from Bureau of Labor Statistics data, looking at unemployment insurance claims. So folks newly unemployed claiming uninsurance benefits. And if we look across the bottom, we can see across the decades, 1967, this data begins, all the way to 2020, and it's a weekly basis. And you see kind of the maroon line as it goes. What the vertical scale is by millions of people, the number of people making those new uninsurance claims for benefits. And you can see in the orange, you see the scale 67 to 20, and I've circled one of the times in the gray bars that go up when we had a formal recession. So you can look down and then see, well, how high is that red bar going, right? Across the decades. Now look here to the right, just in March. You see 2 points in March, with the top one being the last week in March. 6.5 million people compared to under 1 million people on a weekly basis across the last handful of decades. So the scale is just extraordinary. This makes the case of why we all need to kind of do things differently, including faster. And to talk about SREB's recommendations to do this, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Dale Winkler, SREB's Vice President for School Improvement. Just before we switch, Jasmine, are there any notes, anything from the chat box we want to be aware of?
All is well.
Okay.
We
So
have
Dale,
greetings from all over.
Great. All over. That's great. A good representation across the states. Thank you. Dale, take it away. Our question he'll answer for us is, how can we calibrate our actions to address targets that keep moving? Dale.
Thank you, Kim, for providing the context for today's discussion. And as she said, we're going to turn now our focus to the actions that respond to the moving targets. So let's talk about 3 actions states can take to gauge needs. We want to first to engage a large body of partners in this discussion. We want to analyze data often, more than yearly and quarterly, and we want to prioritize and coordinate immediate actions. And so on here, we're going to be looking at who are the shareholders that need to address quickly the changing economy. This slide lists several that we're going to talk about and identify, and I'm sure that you will identify others. You'll definitely want to start with folks from your cabinets for economic development or other state agencies that deal with workforce development and business and industry. Of course, your workforce development boards, both regional and state, as well as industry sector leaders. You'll want to make sure that you're gathering those leaders within the various sectors of it, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, finance, and so forth. Then you'll want your data experts, those individuals within each of your agencies who oversee data systems and the collection of data related to workforce and education. And when we talk about education and training leaders, you'll want to ensure that you're including course K-12, post-secondary, and adult ed. And then the other members of the community, maybe your state chambers, government officials, civic organizations. You'll want to make sure that this net is broad in bringing in all the individuals who need to be at the table. So as we move on, you know, we want to think about our labor market information. And I know you hear this term a lot, but it's surprising to me sometimes when I talk to groups of individuals, when I say your LMI, it's an acronym they're not familiar with. But as we're analyzing our data more frequently, we want to think about what data is it that's important right now in the midst of COVID that we should be looking at. So we're going to ask that you participate by entering into the chat box 1 or 2 types of labor market information that you most frequently analyze. So if you'll go to the chat box, and I'll pause for about 15 or 20 seconds and allow you to enter into the box 1 or 2 types of labor market information you most frequently analyze. Encourage everyone to participate and share, thinking about that LMI that you look at regularly and probably are going to look at more frequently. See here, someone's put employment, unemployment. It's being broken down by industry, also by demographics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, labor market participation, employment growth. So continue to add those in there so others can think about different data points that they might need to start collecting, especially right now in the era of COVID. Kim is going to go ahead and transition the slide so you can see some that we had thought of, and some of those align with those that you're putting in there. Unemployment insurance claims, job postings and wages, in-demand skills, talking about regional specific LMI, capacity of education entities, interest and readiness of the communities, employer input, community input, and then in regards to the context of COVID. So thank you for entering that and continue to enter that, and we'll capture your responses in the chat box to share later. In looking at this LMI, we also want to take into consideration access and support for each and every member of your community. So we want to have an equity focus and also an innovation focus as we are entering these unprecedented times. So now, instead of entering into the chat box labor market information, we're going to ask that you enter into chat box. What are other ways that we should disaggregate data in this time of COVID? You know, we wanted to make sure there are many voices at the table, that we're looking at trends, that we're looking at gaps and disaggregating the data by geography, demographics, educational attainment. But what are other ways that we should disaggregate the data right now? Take a couple minutes or seconds at least and put into chat box, are there other ways that we should disaggregate the data? In order to keep our focus on equity and in making sure that everyone within our community has access and the support they need in preparing for the jobs. Seeing some more come in here, so that's great. Changes in technology, transportation methods, short-term versus long-term, broadband access, that's good, because those are also some of the things that we thought of too as we were talking through this webinar series. You know, we need to look at the COVID numbers, we need to talk about access to technology, and also a focus really around short-term training. And so how often do we need to look at this data? As Kim mentioned earlier, when we look at some of our federal acts, often we would bring together folks once a year, maybe twice a year, to look at some of our data, so biannually or quarterly or monthly. But now in this context, we are going to have to look at it more often. And today we're going to have a speaker who talks about having access and the review of data on a weekly basis. And so that's why we wanted to share a promising practice around how to do that, because it's very important to do that. So as your cross-sector teams begin to coordinate actions, there will be items that it must consider, and it must establish priorities. And so you see here, we're going to list some of those you need to think about right now. Who are your hardest hit industries right now in your community? What jobs that most need to be filled right now? What are the critical skills and credentials, and how do we get to those as quickly as possible and get people trained in order to meet those needs? Who are the people in the communities that have been most impacted by COVID, and how do we reach out to them, and how do we provide services? And we have to inventory pre-COVID initiatives. But in addition to these priorities right now, for the next 4, 6, and 12 months, there are long-term priorities in addition to these that we have to keep in mind and keep working towards, such as what are those long-term growth industries? What are the long-term needs? Those stackable credentials. How, if we're going to right now train individuals to meet the critical need, can they take those skill sets and transfer them in the future and continue to build on their skill sets for future credentials? Keeping an equity focus throughout all of this and everything that we do, and also being able to repurpose our resources, because we're all having to shift our resources right now to meet the current needs. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kim, and she's going to take us through some resources on how to get this done, and then she will introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you very much. So all these considerations, questions, ways in which to slice and dice the data, how fast to do it, what are the resources we can bring to bear to get this done? So we know that as leadership bodies come together at a state level, and so too at the local level, each of us, you know, as Dale talked about the different groups of folks we want at the table, we're all familiar with the funding sources we use the most. Maybe not so familiar with the funding sources that our colleagues around the table use. And so SREB's goal in this webinar series, we have one of these for each webinar, is to take a look at the resources that your coalition will have at hand that you can braid together strategically to get the things done that we are recommending. So I want you to take a look, if you would, at these resources. You're going to see across the top in the bright green the funding sources. The Every Student Succeeds Act for K-12 education, Perkins for career and technical education, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act for workforce development, the Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act for COVID, state funds, and other kinds of funds. And what we'd like to do just briefly is, before we fill this in for you, we thought we'd take just a moment to get our brains going together. Take less than a minute, if you would, in the chat box and pop in one of these funding sources, or perhaps others, that you bring to the table that you are most familiar with working with to get data-based planning and partnerships across with business and industry going to promote growth in your state. What is it that you are most familiar with? And we'd like to just take a look at that together briefly before we reveal SREB's matrix.
Kim, I'm going to interject here too. This is Stephen again. You know, we really believe strongly that if we are going to make a difference here, and we are going to really do something to improve and really provide a successful economy, that we're going to have to figure out how to eliminate turf. There's going to have to be almost an unprecedented amount of collaboration. But most of all, people need to come together around, what do you want your economy to be? What do you want your workforce to look like over the next, say, 5 to 10 years? And that helps give a little bit of a North Star on which direction you're headed. But as you guys are considering this and putting your comments in the chat box, and even as we go forward, you know, it's hard. I mean, partners are great if it wasn't for all the dang partners. I mean, you know, we know how hard that is. But at the same time, and I've sat in that chair at a state agency, and there's so much going on. It's hard to find that time to collaborate. But I really believe, and I think our SREB staff believes this too, that if we're going to really do something special and we're going to really bounce back, it's going to take an unprecedented amount of collaboration and focus. So we just look forward to seeing, because we know that you're going to be able to do it. And we're proud to be able to help you do it. But there's a mindset that I think we've got to shift to.
Yep. Great. And I'm seeing things as they come into the chat box. Most of us are mentioning one or two sources. Overall, I would say one or two sources that we're familiar with, which is as it maybe should be. We bring our specialty and our expertise, right? But as we sit around the table now, hopefully with more diverse and motivated partners to really, as Stephen said, just get rid of egos, if you will, and turf and dive in together, it'll help us to understand better the various sources each other brings. So this is SREB's contribution to helping us kind of see this together. So you'll see here, I won't read the chart to you, but just point out maybe a few highlights in the ways that you might understand the chart and talk about it with your colleagues. So going left to right, we show different elements or funding streams within these various statutes and sources that you can use. So just some highlights. We see even down in the K-12 arena with ESSA, there are funds available in the titles to support database planning and partnerships amongst educators, businesses, and other leaders. When we think about Perkins, of course, our state level funds, those reserve funds, can be used to plan and promote innovative strategies in career and technical education and meeting the needs of industry, those industry partnerships. Of course, the state and local planning is required to involve business and industry partners. And you've got your Title I funds for state and local providers that they can use to support industry sector partnerships. When we look at WIOA, those workforce funds, right? That's the whole purpose of WIOA is our workforce development, right? So there are places throughout, we've highlighted a few. And I'll note in particular that the expanded dislocated worker grants that the feds have expanded the Department of Labor because of COVID, 14, I think it is, at last count of our SREB states had gotten these expanded grants, so that money can be brought to bear. And you see down here at the bottom left in orange, it just bears noting that the K-12, CTE, and workforce funds are required now to be coordinated at a state level in planning to make our education to workforce preparation pipeline more seamless. And SREB takes a real in-depth look at this in our 2019 publication, Designing a Ready Workforce. So you can pick up Designing a Ready Workforce on SREB's website or just email me. We'll get it to you, all right? It takes a really in-depth look at the places where these intersect. When we look at the CARES Act, of course, the K-12 and post-secondary funds and the governor's emergency funds can be used to fund this kind of planning and coordination. They're reimagining workforce grants out of the Department of Education for increasing industry-based training and short-term training programs at post-secondary institutions can be brought to bear. The economic recovery and assistance grants to states and local entities can support planning, technical assistance, and innovation. And certainly we've got your state funds that are super precious. All this funding is precious, certainly, and limited. When it comes to state funds, we're even encouraging you to take that hard look at your initiatives to see what might need to be phased out, to phase in stuff to meet new needs as they emerge. And then other funding sources like your business and industry contribution to these efforts, your community support, in-kind support for meetings and data analysis and the like, as well as philanthropic grants from partners nationally and within the state. So without further ado, are there any questions actually about the resource matrix here or anything within? Jasmine, how are we looking in the chat box?
No questions, but a lot of insight on what resources they are using. I think you touched on quite a handful.
Okay, good. Let's be paying attention to that. We'll make sure to get information from the chat box out to folks as part of what we download as well. So let's hear how one state is knocking it out of the park when it comes to doing just what we are advocating here, and that is Indiana. So our colleague, Chris Lowery, who is Senior Vice President for Workforce Alignment at Ivy Tech Community College, is going to take us through a discussion of how his team works with others to do weekly, folks, weekly labor market reports to inform the state's rapid recovery initiative. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to ask Jasmine to hand it over to Chris. Thanks, Chris. Think you're on mute.
Here we go. Sorry about that, folks. Now I'll go back to share. All right. And I assume we're good there, Kim?
Yep, we're good.
I'll put it on show. There we go. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be part of this. I've really been looking forward to this. Kim, I think you and I met because of the event that was a month or so ago hosted by Education Strategy Group. And they were covering some similar topics, but I have to tell you, I'm so impressed with the series you've put together, and am already carving out time on my calendar. Okay, I'm from Indiana. I'm not one of your states in your organization, but I'm planning to join in and eavesdrop. Just a couple of quick observations. This is, I'm filling up my book with notes. It's just been so impressive. And just a few key takeaways for myself, and I think they're germane to what I'm going to share with you in a moment. One of you talked about the braiding of resources and the elimination of turf. It's just so critical, and hopefully I'll share a little information with you here that'll demonstrate to you that we're trying to do that in Indiana and feel pretty good about it. Also, I'm not sure whether it was Dr. Pruitt or Dr. Winkler who referenced partners often and prioritizing. And we could not agree anymore. And then lastly, real quickly, as I move on here, the importance of having, I think it was referred to as a North Star. And I think that's so critical. And as I start to jump into this, I would share with you that our state has been working for the last half dozen or so years on that North Star. And I would give credit to a few individuals who really brought us to that point. Several of us were involved in those discussions, but some years ago now, really two people in our state took the lead on this work, appointed by our governor. One was Sue Ellspermann. She happens to now be the president of Ivy Tech Community College, longtime friend of mine and our former lieutenant governor. And Joe Lowery. Some of you may know Joe. Among many other things, he serves as chairman of the board for the Lumina Foundation. And the plan we put together, it's another topic for another day, Kim, emphasizes three things: alignment, engagement, and advancement. And aligning the system, engaging in a very, very student and employer sector-centric way, and then advancing along, yes, a demand-driven curve. So underpinnings to our system. Real quickly to share with you, as COVID was coming to the fore for all of us, now going on 6 months ago, which is really hard to believe, a group of us who are just so accustomed to working together decided to get together and determine what we might do about addressing COVID in the short term, what that looked like in the longer term, and so forth. And I had actually put together an outline and a brief PowerPoint and shared it then, I think it was the last weekend of March, with leaders from the organizations you see in the second bullet point there. We have a governor's workforce cabinet. The governor has a cabinet and then specifically has a workforce cabinet. And you're welcome to look it up. It's a really critical part of what we're doing in Indiana, representing all of those areas that we've already talked about, braiding together. Our Commission for Higher Education, Workforce Development, you can see the others there. We're also fortunate that not only is the Lumina Foundation headquartered in Indianapolis, but so is Strata Education. And we tap on those folks' shoulders oftentimes. A key group also that we included in our discussions was the Indiana Philanthropy Alliance. In Indiana, that is the alliance that represents virtually all of the philanthropic entities in our state, from the smallest community foundation to the Lilly Endowment. Ivy Tech Community College, Vincennes, which is a four-year, essentially technical university, our chamber, and we really leaned into a community-based and faith-based organization strategy. We represented them. We wanted to get our heads around how to think about those groups and not leave anyone out, and you'll see sort of the little pentagon there that we devised. As we moved into this work really in early April, we thought we would really need to focus on four key things: training and education opportunities, career coaching, and we're still evolving with that work. We think especially those adults that I believe Dr. Pruitt referenced as unemployable as we go forward. A lot of work is needed in that area. Really sharing of the resources has already been talked about, and this focus on labor market demand. The first thing we did was to step back and do a situation assessment. to really develop this strategy. And as has already been discussed today, just a lot of dynamic shifts occurring in the marketplace. And again, as we saw, and I'll try to demonstrate here in a moment, we saw certain sectors and certain industries really being hit hard. But what has been so interesting is how fluid that has been. Unemployment really hitting some sectors particularly hard, some rebounding perhaps in the next month, and then being hit again in the following month. So that's been really, a moving target. Kim alluded to this, but we are doing I can't tell you it's constant, but it is a weekly analysis, both quantitative and qualitatively, and I'll show you how we bring that together. Again, looking at how rapid all of this is moving for individuals, employers, sectors. And what we came up with is really an ecosystem. And I think like many things in COVID, we're going to be using that ecosystem as we go forward to inform what we had already been braiding together. So what we do is weekly, essentially a supply and demand assessment. I would share with you too, our college, and if you're not familiar with Ivy Tech, we are a singly accredited statewide institution in Indiana. A lot of benefits to that, as you might guess. We have 40 some locations, 160,000 students, 8,000 employees, on and on, but it gives us the ability to scale and to support efforts exactly like this. So in looking at the supply and demand analysis, that's something our college has now been doing for 3 years. We do it at a regular cadence, the primary one of which is on an annual basis. And Kim, your chart that showed, I think it was on gauging needs more frequently, had the diamond and the 4 boxes. We actually use that construct for what we call a 4-quadrant supply and demand analysis of every one of our programs at every one of our locations of the college. And that determines how we're going to allocate our resources. So we built off of that and with much greater frequency for what we're doing now. We look at real-time state unemployment data. MZ, I noticed in the chat, various folks use MZ or EMSI, as you might guess. Again, Strata's located in our backyard and they're a great company. But then we also bring into this report I'm going to share with you every week findings from other organizations. I reference here Brookings Institute and American Enterprise Institute. You probably know. One is center left, one is center right, and then we also augment it with a number of other resources ranging from Wall Street Journal to New York Times to the Financial Times and so forth. But then something that really helps us at a ground level, and again, I shared with you that we're, as a system, fairly ubiquitous to Indiana. We have the scale and reach. We work with our campus chancellors and then with our workforce and employer consultants who the college has throughout the state to gather information on a weekly basis. So they report in to my team and me what's going on from a sector standpoint, what's going on from a geographic standpoint, right? Those kind of things like, a WARN notice has been issued in Anderson, Indiana, or, this company has said they're going to expand or locate to Lafayette, Indiana, those types of things. And then we also incorporate, because it's just great work, the polling that Strata and a lot of times in partnership with Gallup do every week. If you don't get their reports, by the way, sign up for them. They're free. They're terrific. What has evolved then is a weekly economic situation report. It struck us, and really it struck an individual who reports to me named Stacy Townsley. You'd be encouraged to look her up. Stacy and I were talking one day, and she said, Chris, we're getting these weekly sit reps or situation reports on the healthcare side of what's going on, and they're quite informative and so forth. And she said, it would seem we should do an economic sit rep. 15 seconds on Stacy. We stole her from our Commission for Higher Education 2 years ago, where she was Associate Commissioner for Data and Analytics. And she also spent 7 years for working for the CIA in data and analytics. So we're fortunate. So our situation assessment that we do, the SITREP report that we do every week, the information comes from and goes to a variety of resources. This document and the link is sent out to now literally thousands of individuals and organizations across the state every week. So what's it look like? I'm going to walk you through one example, and it occurred to me, Kim, I could have put in a more updated version here. This is the one I used with the ESG group recently, but nevertheless gives you an idea. So this is a document we do at PDF. We also do at Link, and the beginning is really an executive summary. So what's going on with the typical data and information you would expect, and whether that's from the state or the feds or something Strata is scraping from the marketplace for us, so that somebody can just glance at it and go, okay, I've got an idea here. Then we dig into and delve into data that's more fresh. So this one, as an example, showed that in June it was 11.2%, the unemployment rate. As of earlier this week, which will be in our upcoming situation report, Indiana's is now at 7.8%, although we're a little skeptical, most of us, of some noise in that data, which again is why we use multiple sources of data and information to help inform what we're doing. As you can see, labor force participation rates are also called out in here, and I noticed that in the chat that those were some of the data points to which I think all or most of us look. This is a bit more in-depth, and this report that helps us look geographically and then by sectors. I should have also referenced that at the college, now going on 4 years ago, when I was asked to do this role, I asked if I could, I don't know how to put this delicately, blow up what we were doing. And with that, ended up hiring vice presidents for the college who have economic sector responsibilities. So as an example, the woman who oversees advanced manufacturing and some related items there used to work for Cummins Engine, who you might be familiar with. Gentleman who leads our School of Business and Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics, spent almost 20 years with FedEx before coming to us, going up the management chain, and just got tired of moving around with the company. So anyway, that gives you a flavor. So we take the state's data and what they're telling us, and then we also cross-reference it to what our economic sector vice presidents are finding and seeing from the field. You can see the geographic information. And again, we also get live information every week and reports from our various campuses and sites around the state. This is some data that ESG provided during that recent seminar. I just thought it was great, and we're looking at it too. I'll go back really quickly for just a second. All of this different information, you'll see we've summarized on the left here, helps us to see what sectors are being hit, what geographies are being hit, and then also when there happen to be rebounds. This I think, was some of the more interesting data that ESG was sharing a few weeks ago, in that if you pick out your own state, what you can see in that February to June example here is really that up and down in the movement of what's happening out in the economy. Again, a little bit more information that's in depth by really the sectors and occupation areas. This is where I think the information gets really rich, because what we're able to do is take the quantitative data, whether that's from MZ or the state or a resource like that, and sort of cross-reference it and supplement it with what our sectors are hearing. So each of our sector VPs has an advisory group with whom she or he works out in the Indiana marketplace, and those folks, as you would guess, have got the regular daily pulse. Sometimes those are folks who own the businesses. Sometimes they're sort of the aggregators of those groups of folks in the economy. This, I referenced a little bit, but this is what Strata, this is one example of what Strata Education puts forth. The data that came out on Tuesday or Wednesday was really interesting. Short-term, ease of use, ease of access, and so forth for adults, very critical. Again, this is information that we supply into that. And then we also provide community-based information, because again, it really does differ geographically around our state. And again, this is live every week from individuals. Stacy, who I mentioned, coordinates this and has somebody who reports to her who does the compiling. Stacy puts the context around it. sort of a writer, editor, and then I'm the publisher. And, I have the last eyes on it and, hopefully don't miss too many things in the process. Real quickly, also thinking about how Ivy Tech has had to shift and decided to shift in this process. I think I'm down to about 1 minute left here. We decided to do a few things ourselves because we're fortunate that we do have the scale and so forth. And we've gotten a lot of learning from it. Back in May, we thought it would be important for us to really step up. And we decided we were going to offer at least 10,000 Hoosiers free training in, high demand, high wage areas where we were seeing that shift in the marketplace. Our partners came to bear with us to help make this happen. As of today, we have over 7,500 who have participated. And what's been interesting is many of those individuals have then also signed up for subsequent courses that are leading to certifications and so forth. And in a second, I'll show you some data related to what we've learned from it. We also created an employer resource link that just gets used all the time. And of course, our situation report. And just a little bit about our 10,000 free classes. You can just look at the chart, 47%. The highest usage has been in information technology. I think that's also not surprising, especially with what we've learned during COVID and the shift in business. And then this slide we thought was really fascinating, the demographic split. We have, and this is the last slide I've got for you, we have really leaned into a couple of ways of reaching our fellow Hoosiers. One certainly is a lot of digital marketing, geofencing, extremely highly targeted. We're also working with the state of Indiana to push out this information to the individuals who have filed for unemployment. And then we think critically important, we have partnerships and we're utilizing those across the state with community and faith-based organizations. They're helping to push this information out too. The bottom left pie chart we think is really important, and I think it was Dr. Pruitt who was referencing the equity lens. We could not agree more. This is critical. And so as we rolled this out, we were very intentional about that. As you can see, the split here, Black participants being 37% in taking advantage of this free training, very, very good training. And that compares to about 12 to 13% of our population in Indiana. So we were really pleased and we're learning something in the process. And we also think that's been highly influenced by the partnerships with community and faith-based organizations. Kim, I might have gone over a minute or so. I apologize for that. A lot to unpack here. And just so you all know too, I would love to connect with any of you. And if you want to have follow-up conversations, because I'm taking a lot of notes and learning from all of you today too. So thank you.
Oh, you are welcome. Brains are going, my brain says, boo, 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 right? Just amazing stuff. I might ask one question before we have to move on. And then thank you for being gracious and connecting with folks after the webinar as they might want to get into some more depth. But what might you like to share, Chris, about, so you did share already on how you guys at the college used this information in these weekly reports and the cumulative learning from those reports to launch your free classes initiative, right?
Yep.
Side note, sessions 2 and 3 of this webinar series are going to talk about initiatives of that nature for adults and our younger learners. But anyway, would you like to share anything about others of your partners? So you mentioned that you disseminate these reports widely across the state. That was one of the things that stood out to me, so that hundreds, if not more, groups or people can be using them. Do you have any kind of anecdotal information about how your colleagues around the state are using these reports to inform their work?
Yeah, Kim, thanks for asking. The first I can think of, and really it's the most impactful, the state of Indiana has something called Next Level Jobs. You can look it up. It's a program of the state of Indiana. Both credit and non-credit training funds are pushed toward those for short-term training, certifications, and certificate, academic and non-credit. And the economic situation reports that we've created have been used to fine-tune those offerings that are approved by the state of Indiana. We did a couple of things in braiding that together. We used the supply and demand analyses that we've got in the situation reports to inform the what. And we also used that to inform the ways in which we were braiding together. I love the slide you had on funding, the different funding pools. So as an example, that team that we brought together used that data, and then from resources that the state had and that are coming to the state, including CARES Act funding, we braided together two pools of funding, $22 million for what's called the Workforce Ready Grant underneath the Next Level Jobs program, and the employer training grants, which also fall underneath those. So that data absolutely informed that. And we thought really importantly, right then it also informed the resource allocation. So a total of $39 million that we'll be spending in the short term on those programs, backing into it, informed very heavily by the situation economic reports. And then our partners have also, across the state, have been utilizing it as an example to inform local funding strategies. You notice that we have Philanthropy involved there. There has been a lot of positive response from Philanthropy to having this kind of data to understand where they might put funds at this time to support their local community.
Oh, nice. All right, I think that gives folks an even richer understanding of the reports. Just phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. Folks, reach out to Chris. There's a link in the chat box I put to those reports. Thanks a million. Let's pivot as we look towards the last few minutes of the hour and get engaged a little bit with each other around some questions and issues that come to mind for each of us, all of us here on the series together. So we're going to switch presenters back to me. Chris, I think you have to stop sharing your screen, and I'm going to start sharing. Let's see.
I think I did.
Okay.
Let me see here.
Why am I? All right, hold on, you guys. We're coming. Huh.
Yeah, I've closed everything and stopped.
All right, here we go. All right, great. Here we go, guys. All right, you should see my screen, hopefully, for the discussion. And somebody scream if not, but I'm going to keep going. So we're gonna tackle in our last few minutes of the hour today 3 questions, knowing that we encourage everyone to use the chat box to just inform us and each other about initiatives going on in your state that may or may not find the time today to highlight kind of more than in the chat box, but we want to know about them. So we're gonna look at 3 questions. What stands out to us the most? Questions we have that we at SREB can respond to, or that Chris can respond to later, and actions we think we need to be taking next. We're gonna go to, I think, 2 polls initially. Jasmine, if you would gear up the first poll, and we really encourage all of us on the group today to respond to these. I want us to think about together here something that stands out to you the most. Hopefully a lot of it stands out, but if you had to pick one thing that you would take away, man, I really got this from the webinar today, would it be engaging the state leadership discussion strategy that Dale shared, the analyzing data in rapid cycles, information that could include how fast, the prioritizing slide there that we talked about the different things to keep in mind, your equity considerations that we went through on that slide, our resource matrix, if that was really kind of eye-opening for you, let us know that. Indiana's work may be what stands out, or if you've got something else, please feel free to answer that in the chat box. But take another 30 seconds if you would, and just off the cuff, what's the one thing that stands out to you the most? We'll go 15 more seconds. The one thing. I'm watching the clock. Okay, so Jasmine, show us how folks are responding. Oh, wow. Yeah, the rapid cycle piece. So Chris, we were well placed to, and that matches with the second most is your presentation. What we really do hope is that indeed the presenters that we have curated for this series, we looked far and wide for folks that are not just doing a great job, but really knocking it out of the park. And that may bring something that is new or super inspiring to you. So we're really glad that we were able to get Chris and really highlight the work of him and his colleagues. So we are taking note of that as well at SREB as we think about, okay, how are we going to best spend our time in supporting you back out in the States? So duly noted for us as we constantly retool our work. Thank you for that. Let's take a look at our second poll question. And again, 30 seconds at the most here to respond. Think about this. Questions that you have. If we had 30 extra minutes to just hang out and chat, we were around the table with each other, what would you be asking about? The various strategies that we shared today, from who to get together, how often to get together, or would equity considerations, okay, that's another one there, the resources that you can bring to bear, or Indiana's work. Something else, certainly pop it in the chat box. What do you have questions about? Again, we hope to use this to really inform how we put together the rest of the webinars, as well as our ongoing work as we take short-term rapid looks, right, at what our states are needing. So thanks for this. 5 more seconds. Your biggest area of questions. Okay, Jasmine, what have we got? Oh, the strategies. Okay. All right. So as we think about the various workshops, webinars, resources we're putting out there, we will think more about ways to support you in doing these things we suggest. But it's actually kind of a nice split, isn't it? Strategies. Okay. Okay, very good. So really informative. We have one more poll, right? Not just a chat, Jasmine? Yep, one more poll. All right. So you guys, last thing, this is going to support your work as you get ready to use what you've learned today. What is the first thing, not the first 10 things, the first one thing that you feel you need to do based on what you've taken away from the webinar today? You're going to reach out to colleagues, reach out to partners outside your, circle of colleagues, dive into your data, look deeper into stuff from this webinar, go back and get the recording or the resource matrix here in the slides, or get with Chris, or is there something else? Take maybe 15 seconds max. What's your first thing you're going to do?
Kim, while they're doing that, we did have one question come in per the last poll. How is COVID going to impact these jobs and what we'll be doing moving forward?
And what SREB will be doing forward, or we in the grand scale, we?
I responded to that. We are going to be building on our unprepared and unaware work. And that's one of the things we're addressing, because as we were preparing for another project here at SREB, I reached out yesterday to Megan, and she was able to provide me some data around changes already in some of our industry sectors in our region based on COVID. And so we'll be sharing some information around that and how it's changing jobs.
Yeah. I'll just add, that's what I kind of led with earlier, that the horizon is no longer 2030, it's actually 2025, where the short story is there's so much that's going to move toward automation and artificial intelligence that it's really going to drive some of the low skill, low wage jobs just out of the market altogether. There's going to be a much greater slant toward, more of a STEM kind of outlook of, and when I say STEM, understand that we're, this fourth industrial revolution, we're sort of redefining what STEM is. Welding involves STEM. A lot of the jobs that historically we may not have thought about it that way is just going to take a different type of training and a different type of thinking. So we'll be publishing, we hope, in the next month or so. But I can tell you the short story is a lot of folks who lost their jobs in COVID will not have jobs to go back to. And the folks who have or who have been employed but have high school diplomas, GEDs, or less, they simply just won't be employable unless we really have a very focused strategy going forward.
And Stephen, to build on that, so everything that Dale and Stephen just shared can be brought to bear. The rest of this webinar series is focused on that, and coming up on the other side of the change of years into 2021, I'm actually working on a series of reports, profiles for each state. So we talked about the resource matrix, and we're looking at the ways states are using, according to their plans they submit to the federal government, how they're aligning their work in K-12 under ESSA, their career and technical education under Perkins, and their workforce development work under WIOA. We're looking at opportunities that states have taken good advantage of and opportunities they've missed, pointing that out for you in profiles we're going to put out for every state. So those will hopefully help you guys in refining your approach to using the funding that you do have at your disposal, amongst other types of funding, but that federal funding, to do the kinds of things that we're advocating here. So we hope to be of great help to the states through kind of multiple sets of resources for you. So let's go ahead and see, Jasmine, how did poll 3 turn out? Wow. Oh, that's good. Okay. So folks are going to be reaching out to colleagues right away to look at that data. And hopefully by the orange, you can see they're digging deeper into information from this webinar, be it our resources here in the slides or reaching out to Chris. So that's great. Thank you very, very much. Join us for the whole series, you guys, or pop in and out as you wish. Spread the word to colleagues. Let us know if you need the link again or the invite, or just forward your own invite, or tell folks. SREB.org/workforce recovery. Check us out. We really want to thank you for your time today here at SREB. You can contact us here, and we showed Chris's contact information, but we can certainly connect you if you need his contact information again. We want to thank you very much for your time today, and thank you to Chris in Indiana and all my colleagues at SREB. Thank you.
Thank you, and well done, Kim. Thanks for everyone for being here.